All right, good morning, good afternoon, good night, good day, whatever the time might be for you. Welcome to the next video lecture for SPCM 200 Public Speaking. In this brief video, I'll be kind of running through digital speaking environments and some of those differences and considerations for how speaking through a digitally mediated fashion is going to be a little bit different than a face-to-face setting, and talk a little bit about what some of those factors are. If you have not yet read Chapter 17 from the textbook, please do so. That will help fill in a lot of some of those missing gaps and some of the information that I'll be going over in this video. So either read Chapter 17 from your textbook. I've also made available a text version of this chapter online on Canvas, just kind of in this interim period. If for whatever reason you don't have access to your textbook, either you never bought one, or it is not accessible to you right now, for instance, it's on campus and you don't want to go back there, whatever the case may be, get in touch with me, and we can kind of sort out what some of those options are. Even if it's not a textbook issue, I'm always open to questions, comments, concerns, or even just to chat. For comments or questions specific to content in this video, I'd encourage you to post those in this discussion post below. That way, if other students have the same question, they can kind of read through those. I'm also always available via email, ben.pettis@colostate.edu, or through chatting or video conferencing on Microsoft Teams. Again, that's through my ben.pettis@colostate.edu email address. So please, I know things might be a little strange with me not being able to talk to you face to face. I know many of us often had quick chats before or after class, which is we don't really have those anymore, so please don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything that I can help with. So with that in mind, I just want to jump right in talking about a digital environment. Our textbook defines a digital environment as any site where people gather to share ideas in new ways made possible by contemporary technological advances. So if you ask me, that's a big wordy definition that doesn't actually say a whole lot. Kind of broad. Really what we can think of any digital environment, it's rather than speaking face-to-face where we're in the same room physically, there's some sort of communication technology, often a digital or electronic communication technology that's then mediating the message. So in this case, I'm recording a video which then gets uploaded and then the message gets to you. You might also have the example of like a Skype or a video interview where you're not across on the table from one another, there's a camera and a computer and the internet between you. So anytime you give a speech or you're speaking in a digital environment, it's going to be different because of this unique venue. Some positive aspects, some negative aspects, which we'll kind of get into through the rest of this video. Before we get into that, I want to really discuss some of these differences from face-to-face speaking. So let's go back to this model of the standard model of communication, which we talked about toward the beginning of the semester. So as you remember, you have your speaker who has an idea in their head that they're going to encode into a particular message, send it across a channel, and hopefully the receiver or that audience is then able to decode that message, understand that information, and perhaps offer some feedback, whether that's nodding, agreeing, laughing, or looking confused. In a face-to-face setting, in this channel, there's all this noise that might interfere with that transmission of the message. So if you remember our classroom that we were in before spring break, there was that loud fan at the back of the room. That's a very literal sense of noise, which can present some challenges for a speaker to effectively transmit a message to their audience. When we shift from face-to-face to online communication or a digital speaking environment, this model of communication still applies. However, there are some differences which come up. For one, there's a lot more opportunities for noise to interfere with that communication channel. I am very aware that even though I'm recording this video and hoping that you're going to give it your undivided attention, it's really easy to just open another tab. Maybe you'll scroll through Twitter, maybe you'll put this video in the background while you do some online shopping. There's 1,000 other things going on, and when we're speaking digitally, it's a lot harder to necessarily limit all those areas of noise that might interfere with the message. So as a speaker, I have to think about how my message is actually getting across. Another thing that's challenging in a digital setting is the fact that audience feedback doesn't happen in the same way. In a face-to-face setting, if you say something, you can immediately see how your audience reacts to it. Digitally, you might, if you're doing a live video conference, but even still, there might be a slight delay in there. Or if it's the case of like what I'm doing here, I'm recording a video and I can't tell how you're going to react to what I'm saying until after it's been recorded. And then finally, this is kind of a minor difference, but might feel minor at least. So in a face-to-face setting, you know who you're speaking to. You can see who your audience is. In our case, it was our class. You knew who was in the audience of your classmates. In this case, in an online setting, you might not know 100% who your audience is. So even though I know I'm going to post this video and make it accessible to my Canvas classes, there's always a chance that maybe your little sister's in the room with you, or maybe like you're watching this with roommates or your family is there. And so the audience might be a little bit bigger than I originally thought. And there's always the chance that even after I post this video to you in these classes, it gets spread further and beyond. So I don't really have a way to ever fully know my audience. So if I were teaching this section in a real face-to-face setting, we would talk a little bit about different examples where you might do digitally mediated speaking. I think now that with the university's full transition to online classes, it can be pretty apparent that, hey, speaking digitally might be a thing that happens, whether that's through an online classroom setting or in the very real world example of a Skype interview, which you very well might have to do at some point in your career. Of course, there's also all sorts of other instances in the quote-unquote real world where digitally mediated speaking does happen. And so what I want to kind of run us through for digital speaking is kind of these broad considerations. Think of these like the delivery components that you should think about anytime that you're now speaking in a digitally mediated fashion. And so that's audio, video, framing, length, permanence, circulation, and audience. I'm just going to kind of run through them quickly, offer some of my quick tips and tricks, some things that I've come across. I would encourage you, as you're thinking about your next speeches, to look through Chapter 17 and think about these various factors as you prepare to record and upload your videos. Audio is exactly what it sounds like, making sure that everyone can hear you. It's really noticeable if the audio quality is poor, more so than if the video quality is poor. So make sure that you're testing your equipment, making sure that you're speaking loudly enough for the microphone to hear you. What I'm doing right now, I just have my iPhone kind of propped up on a shelf, no fancy microphones, headphones, or anything. But some people, what they'll do for Skype calls is like they might actually use headphones to kind of avoid this weird echo. Whatever you end up doing, just test it out, make sure it's going to work. For audio, do keep in mind that you will probably need to try to slow down and articulate your words a little bit more purposefully, and that's just because with digital audio, a lot of times the compression can kind of run words together, and depending on what you're listening on, just because it sounds good on my end, it might not sound as good. So just kind of think about what you can do to make sure that everything you're saying can be heard clearly. Related to audio, of course, is video. Like I said, poor quality video is actually less of an issue than most people think it would be. As long as we can mostly see you and hear you, that's all that really matters. As far as the video quality itself goes, I don't expect us all to be, experts in video production, but there are some things to think about. For instance, the lighting. You want to make sure that you can actually see me. So I'm recording this during the day. I've got some light coming in from the window. I have this light above me, so hopefully you can see me pretty well. A pretty simple backdrop, a couple whiteboards and a blank wall behind me. There was a bunch of other posters and knickknacks up on the wall. I took those down just so it wouldn't be as distracting. And then finally, a steady camera. If everything's shaking all over the place, it's going to be really hard for you to focus on anything I'm actually saying. So I just have my iPhone propped up here. That's been working pretty well. So you don't necessarily need to have a fancy tripod. Just use whatever's going to work for you. Related to video is this idea of framing, and that's just what's actually within the field of view that you can see. So for instance, if I were to stand like aggressively close to the camera, this would be pretty poor framing for this video. So I'm kind of making sure that I'm standing in an area where you can see me clearly. I'm not too close. I'm not like way far away from the camera as well. There's no good rule of thumb for this. You want to think about what the situation is. Like, does it make sense for you to see all of me? Do you only need to hear what I'm saying? Consider how that plays into how close you want to be to the camera. Just like with the audio, test it out. So, before you record an entire video, maybe just shoot a quick, 5-second clip and get an idea of what you look like. Main thing with framing and video, make sure you're looking at the camera actually and not at the screen that you might be looking at. It's really easy, especially if you're doing like a Skype video conferencing, to want to look into their eyes, but if you're not looking at the camera, if you're looking at the screen, you might kind of have this weird thing where your eyes aren't quite making eye contact. So just make sure to look at the camera, and that will simulate eye contact as best as possible. I've had some people in the past, what they say they've done is like get a pair of googly eyes and like tape them next to their webcam. What I do sometimes is I'll get a sticky note and just draw an arrow, say like, hey, look here, just to kind of help keep me on track. It's really difficult to do, and of course no one's perfect about it. I'm certainly not perfect about it, but trying to make eye contact as much as possible by looking directly at the camera is going to be beneficial. Next, as far as digital considerations, is length or duration. Like we talked about, it's really easy for the audience to become distracted. There's a good chance that you might be, looking at Twitter or doing online shopping or doing other things as well. Anything that's longer than 2 to 3 minutes, you're probably really going to have to be fighting to keep your audience's attention and not want them to be scrolling away. So because I'm doing longer videos, I'm thinking about how I can incorporate other strategies. So for instance, throughout, I might remind us all, hey, if there's questions, please feel free to email me or let me know in the discussion post below. This is often why you'll see on YouTube where YouTubers will say, oh, what do you think about this? Drop a comment or leave a like here, and they'll put that in the middle of the video, kind of as a way to remind the audience to like, hey, keep paying attention to me. For your speeches, I wouldn't worry too much about this, just because that would require, you don't have to become a YouTube star, but just be mindful that if you're getting over, just a small number of minutes, there's a good chance you might be losing the audience, and it's harder to check in with the audience since, you can't see them necessarily. So you might want to build in, a couple of natural pauses or, additional internal summaries or previews that you might have used before, just to keep the audience with you and on track. The last ones I'll kind of run through briefly. Permanence, that's just this idea that anything you put online has the potential to be online forever. So just be mindful of sharing or posting. So if someone uploads something to Canvas, that doesn't necessarily mean that they want you to then go and re-upload that to Facebook, Instagram, and everywhere as well. And just know that anything you put online, there's a good chance it won't be there forever, but maybe 20 years down the road, it might come back up. So just be mindful of that. On a related note, circulation, there's always the chance that even if you post something in one spot online, someone can just download it and re-upload it somewhere else. So things online have the potential to take on a life of their own. For our class, you'll just be uploading to a Canvas discussion post here. So we hopefully won't have any issues. I'm certainly not planning on sharing your videos, anything beyond what I need to grade them. But just be mindful. This is more for outside of this class. Anything you post online might kind of spread a little bit further than you might want. So just be thoughtful about that. And then finally, like I talked about earlier, your audience in a digitally mediated speaking setting is generally unknowable. You're never going to know 100% of who all is actually watching you, and so it's best to assume it's as broad and as general as possible, just to kind of make sure that you're not making any assumptions about who's going to be watching. Again, you can generally know it's going to be our class watching our speeches, but in other settings, there's always the chance that it can kind of be a little bit wider than you might think it is. So overall, these considerations, so audio, video, framing, length, permanence, circulation, and audience, are those broad considerations of digital speaking, kind of these extra delivery components to kind of just think about as you plan and prepare to record and upload a speech. These all contribute to what we can call the digital style of speaking. So we've had oral style, written style, now we have digital style. Really, digital style is just kind of oral style with some extra stuff on it. So it's speaking out loud, but then because we're doing things digitally mediated, we're using online communications technologies, you can use those affordances or features of that technology to enhance your speech. So you might be able to embed links or even just post links with your speech. You might, if you want to get really fancy, do graphics and titles for different sections. Again, you're not required to, but it's something that is now made possible by the fact that we are doing digital speaking. You might do what I have right here where I've got my video and then the split screen visual aid. It's easy to do background music, voiceovers. One thing I didn't actually put on this list, but that is a very real affordance of digital technologies, is that you get a do-over. Like if you record your speech and it doesn't quite work out how you want, you can just go back and redo it, which is something that you didn't have the option to do in a face-to-face setting. So really digital style, it's nothing too new or too fancy. It's just knowing that because we're no longer face-to-face and we're speaking digitally, there's some extra affordances and features that you might be able to take advantage of. In general, the ground rule is to just always match your speaking style to your target audience and speaking context. This is the same for a face-to-face setting, so you'll speak to a group of college students very differently than you would speak to a group of 5-year-olds. So similarly, just because we're speaking in a digitally mediated fashion, you still want to match your speaking style to the audience. So because we're doing digital speeches, you do get a little bit more leeway. You're not in a classroom, so it doesn't necessarily have to feel as formal, but if you want to make it be a little bit more formal, you do have a little bit of flexibility there. The main thing for both this class and any other speaking you do, get a sense of the audience as best you can, get a sense of the speaking context and situation best you can, and then adapt your own speech and speaking style to match that context and situation. Okay, that's all I have for you about digital speaking environments. Like I said, hopefully the contents of this video paired with everything from chapter 17 will give you a good overview of what you need to know as we move forward with online instruction. As always, I am here as a resource for you. If there's questions about any of this, there's the discussion post below to talk about. You can email me, again, ben.pettis@colostate.edu, or I'll be generally available on Microsoft Teams. That's either text chatting or video conferencing, again, through that ben.pettis@colostate.edu email address. Don't hesitate to reach out and let me know if there's anything that I can do to help make your experience in SPCM 200 a success. All right, take care.